Okay, I was very happy that something worked out for me tonight. I really felt a siyata dishmaya because I recently discovered something in a sefer that I was very excited about. And then you have the Yetzer Hara to do what's called to put the arrow in the tree and then draw the bullseye around it. Meaning, it's supposed to be a shor in Parshas of Shavua, but I really want to give out this thing I found. And let's see how it can turn into the Parsha. You know, you can always do what they say. The old Darshan only had one drasha about Parshas Korach. So he would get up there and he was about to speak and he dropped his pen, said, oh, this pen fell just like Korach and his Eidah fell into the earth. Once we're talking about Korach, you would have, but here, Lamaisa, it really does connect to the Parsha, really and naturally. So here it is. I'll tell you first what I got so excited about. There's a sefer that I bought a long time ago, right? This is it. It even says that it was on sale for 30 shekel. Okay, and it is summaries of shiurim given by a very, very interesting Jew named Rav Shlomo Hoffman. Rav Shlomo Hoffman was born in Czechoslovakia, came to Eretz Yisrael as a young man. As a boy, he learned first in, I think, Petach Tikva, then he learned in the Chevron Yeshiva. And he had many amazing connections with many Gedolim. In other words, Chevron didn't really have their dormitory set up in Yerushalayim, so he slept in the house of Reb Shlomo Zviller, the Zviller Rebbe, Reb Shlomo, and he had connections with that. And he was his primary connection was with Reb Isaac Sher. Reb Isaac Sher was the son-in-law of Alter Slobodka, who didn't come when the yeshiva moved to Chevron. He came afterwards. He was running the yeshiva in Slobodka. And then when he came here, he would speak a lot in Yerushalayim, and he founded the Slobodka Yeshiva in Bnei Brak. But Rav Moshe Shapiro Zatzal said that this Reb Shlomo Hoffman was the last talmid of Reb Isaac Sher. And he himself said that he thought about the things Reb Isaac taught him virtually every day. Now, they got him involved first in dealing with the youth aliyah, meaning trying to get him involved in the system because so many kids were coming to Eretz Yisrael and losing their connection with Yiddishkeit.
What year are we talking about?
1940s, really beginning of the state. And then he had this opening. They were looking for people to be counselors in the Israeli prison system. Okay, and they needed, and he joined up. In those days, you didn't need particular degrees or whatever.
In public school system also.
Oh, really? Just you could go into the teaching. So that was it. So he went in.
With no degrees, he was the epitome of all the.
Oh, the Wild West. That was the. So he went into that, and there he used a lot of the Torah that he got from his Rebbeim in the idea of rehabilitation, which in essence is teshuvah, right? To guide them through that process in the prison system. Along with that, Gedol Yisrael were sending him teachers and Rosh Hashivas and Mashgichim and private individuals to receive counseling and guidance, and he would give these vadim, these shiurim in his house to guide people. And only after he passed away, he had given permission for talmidim to print, and a lot is coming out now. They begin to start translating into English. So like many shiurim that I get excited about, they're on the shelf, and I'd read the biography in the beginning that was interesting, but I didn't really dig in. I opened up, and this is what I found, which is a real game changer for Chodesh Elul, but really throughout the year. Okay, he talks about a discussion he had with the Rosh Yeshiva of the Chevron Yeshiva in 1948, Rav Yechezkel Sarna. He said, I was walking down the hallway in the yeshiva, and the Rosh Yeshiva of Yechezkel Sarna walked by me, and he said, why do you look so sad and serious? Atzuv uretzini. So he answered, he said, Aser Simei Teshuvah, the days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, the days of Teshuvah. So Rav Yechezkel said to him, who said that in Aser Simei Teshuvah you don't have to be happy? So he said, I answered him, he said, I'm learning about the mitzvah of Teshuvah, and it's impossible. Who can fulfill it? The Rambam says, okay, and we'll look at this Rambam in a second. He says, what is the level of teshuvah you're supposed to reach? Ad sheyoid olav yodea talumos, until the one who knows the secret depths of a person will testify that shelo yoshuv, that you're not going to go back to that aver again anymore. Many, many people who read that Rambam have a very hard time then approaching Yom Noraim, right? Because, again, if we're using me as an example, not the greatest example, right? Every year I say, Al chet shechatonu lefanecha b'lashon hara. And I know that I'm probably going to be saying it the next year and have what to say for. Okay? So that means that if the Yodea Talumas, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, looks into the kishkas of Schuster, right, in Elul, he says, do I see deep, deep, deep inside that he's never going to say Lashon Hara again? No, I don't see that. And the Rambam said, this is the way of teshuvah. This is the definition of teshuvah. That's what the young Shlomo Hoffman, as a yeshiva bacher, was overwhelmed with, and that's what Rav Yechezkel Levenstein saw. Okay, now I will mention parenthetically that there are many approaches, even to what the Rambam says, that explain, obviously a person can't promise to HaKadosh Baruch Hu what's going to happen, and they explain it has an idea of what you really want inside, that at that moment at least, you don't want. There are different approaches, but Rav Yechezkel didn't go that way. He said the following. He said the Rosh Hashiva began to scream at me. So Ekalai. He said, why are you being machmir like the Rambam? Why are you being machmir like the Rambam? We are maker like Rabbeinu Yonah. Says, you need to know the Torah Shabbal Peh that goes in the world of Torah is true. There's the Rambam, but there's Rabbeinu Yonah. And he's saying, Rav Yechezkel got these things from the Alter Slobodka, who got from the Alter of Kelman, Rabbi Yisro Salanter. Says, Rabbeinu Yonah says, the Ikar Chiyuv Tshuva is for a person to go from a status of what's called Yisyatsev al derech lotov. If a person is standing, he's on the wrong road, to go to Yisyatsev al derech tov, to get on the right road. Okay, and he says it's meduyak in the Gemara. This fits into what it says in the Gemara. The Gemara says, Yom HaKippurim mechaper lashovin. Yom Kippur atones for people that are doing teshuvah. He says, note that it doesn't say ve'ele sheshavu, to those that completed teshuvah, but to those who are in the process of teshuvah. He says that means if you're on that path, that's the Hagdara of shoving. Okay, and he gave him an example. He said, let's say a man wants to drive from Yerushalayim to Bnei Brak. The drive is taking longer than he expected. Right? It's getting on 2 hours already, and he pulls into a gas station, and he says, am I close to Bnei Brak? The guy says, if you call 3 hours close, you're close. He says, what 3 hours? He says, I've been on the road. He says, you're in Beersheba, sir. Okay, you must have taken a wrong turn, and you were going south, and you should have been going the other way. He says, the moment that person pulls out of the gas station and turns his car towards Bnei Brak, that's teshuvah. He's on the derech tov. Okay, he's on that derech tov. Now, he says like this. He says, that means that this can be a very long process. He said, do you think that within a week between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, a person can do teshuvah shlema, total teshuvah? In 1 week, you can change and suddenly perfectly fulfill thousands of sifim in Shulchan Aruch. You don't even have time to read them. Okay, he said it's a mistake. He says teshuvah is not what you do in a minute. He says in Aseret Yimei Teshuvah, you're searching for a direction, and you're searching to get onto that right path. How long will it take you to get there? Could be 120 years. He says that's it. Rabbeinu Yonah is saying that what you have to do is to get onto that path. And he told them this is something you have to teach the other Bachrim. That teshuvah is not something you do in a minute. The essence of teshuvah is a long process. Doesn't matter if it's 20 years, 80 years, 120 years. The fact that you're on and in the process, that gives you this definition of shoving, of teshuvah. That's gold. That is very, very important. I know so many people have been tortured by their understanding of the Rambam that way and have the sense that that's it. I'm going to get a failing grade on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. It's not for me. So here, this is a very important piece. What does this have to do with our Parsha? So when Am Yisrael are traveling to Har Sinai, the Pasuk says, Vayis'u mir-Refidim. They traveled from a place called Refidim. Vayavo midbar Sinai vayachnu bamidbar. They came to the desert of Sinai and they camped in the desert. So Rashi says, Vayisu mir-Refidim. So he says, Lama utzrach lachzor lefarish mehechan naso. Why did it have to tell us where they came from? Kvar kosav shebir-Refidim hayuchonim. It already told us that they camped in a place called Refidim. So now if they're moving on, right, that's where they're going from. He says, "Biyadua shemisham naso el lahaki ish nisiyosan mirefidim libiyosan har Sinai." To make a hekesh, to make a connection between their status when they traveled from Refidim and their status when they arrived in Midbar Sinai. Ma biyosan b'Midbar Sinai b'teshuvah, just as their arrival in Midbar Sinai was when they were in a state of teshuvah, af nisiyosan mirefidim b'teshuvah. They also traveled from Refidim b'teshuvah. Now, there's a lot of unknowns behind this Rashi. Okay, first of all, what were they doing teshuvah for when they traveled from Refidim? What kind of teshuvah were they doing when they arrived in Midbar Sinai? So Refidim, right, Chazal say that it's an acronym, stands for Rafu Yedehem Min HaTorah, that their hands weakened, their grip weakened on the Torah. They didn't hold it tightly. Now the Sfas Emes addresses the question, wait a second, they didn't get the Torah yet. Right? How could it be their hands weakened on something they didn't get? You could say they'd already received some mitzvahs before, but he explains that they'd weakened the very idea that they could really receive the Torah, that the Torah was for them, that they had that suffix, right? Amalek came right after that. They said, Ayesh Hashem b'kirbeinu im ayin, is Hashem really among us or not? Then Vayovo Amalek, whose gematria is suffix, when they had that dealt. But the problem is that here they're starting from, it says, fact we know they arrived in Midbar Sinai doing teshuvah. Therefore, it gives us a hekesh that when they traveled from Refidim, they were also doing teshuvah. But what source do we have that they did teshuvah in Midbar Sinai? So a couple years ago, we learned the Shem Shmuel, and I saw other Sfarim had this approach. They said, since it says, Vayichan Sham Yisrael neged Har, that Am Yisrael singular camped opposite Har Sinai, and Chazal darshaned on that they were ki'ish echad b'leiv echad, like one person with one heart. That can only happen if people are doing teshuvah. Otherwise, there's too many divisions between us unless we've done teshuvah. Okay, that can be even problems bein adam lamokum, cause divisions between us, bein adam lachavero, and therefore they get it to Refidim. Okay, so now the question is, we have that Am Yisrael did teshuvah. They did teshuvah in Refidim, they did teshuvah in Midbar Sinai. The question is then, if they did teshuvah like the simple reading of the Rambam, that the Yodea Talumos looked inside of them and said, that's it, they are never going to return to sin again. How did Chet HaEgel happen? How did Chet HaEgel happen? In other words, it's also, you have to realize the teshuvah that they did got them over the bar to be able to receive the Torah. The whole process. Moshe Rabbeinu said, they're in Memteh Sharituma. What schus do they have to come out of Mitzrayim? HaKadosh Baruch Hu told them, when you take them out of Mitzrayim, they're going to serve me on this mountain, meaning they're going to be able to receive the Torah. And the process of Sfiras HaOmer is getting out of those 49 gates of Tumah, getting into 49 gates of Kedusha. And if they received the Torah, that means they were there. That means they got there. So then how could such people do Chet HaEgel? So there's many shocking chazals, and it's based on Psukim and Tilim. Pasuk in Tilim, Perek Ayin Ches, Lamed Vav Lamed Zayin. It says, Vayifatuhu b'fihem, and they seduced or tricked HaKadosh Baruch Hu with their mouths, ubilshonom yechazvu lo, and with their tongues they were untruthful to him. V'libam lo nochonimo, their hearts weren't really straight with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. V'lo nemnu bivirso, and they weren't loyal to his bris, to his covenant. What is David HaMelech describing there? Chazal and Bava Kama say, that's about Matan Torah. That's about Matan Torah. Okay? And he says, the Tosefta, right, says like this, V'chein motzinu, kshayu Yisrael omdim al Har Sinai, when Am Yisrael were standing at Har Sinai, bikshu lignov das helyona. They wanted to do on HaKadosh Baruch Hu something that's called Gnevas Das. Gnevas Das is a fascinating form of Gneva. Because, right, we're used to, it's not even what you call intellectual property that you're stealing. That also is a type of Geneva. Here, right, the classic example is that I'm sitting at home, it's been a long day, and I want to treat myself to a little something, so I happen to have this very, very fine bottle of wine, right, that somebody gave me, a 500 shekel bottle of wine, that was crushed by holy feet or something like that, whatever it is, and I pop the cork, and I'm about to relax, and suddenly I see that you're coming to visit me out the window. So you knock on the door, I open up, I said, I saw you coming. I said, now's the time to open that bottle of wine. Right? Okay, so here, that's called Genevas Das. Why? Because the person feels that they're obligated towards me, right? That they feel that I did something. The whole relationship now is based on a lie. Okay, that's something called Genevas Das. And there are many forms of it. But here it says, Am Yisrael, we're doing this to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Okay, because they said, Kol asher diber Hashem naseh v'nishma. They said those beautiful words, naseh v'nishma. HaKadosh Baruch Hu was very impressed. He said, Mi gilo rozeh lebonai. Who revealed the secret to my children? Lashon shemalachei asheris mishtamshim bo. This is the language that the malachim use. And it says, it looks like, right? It looks like that it worked, right? Because in V'aschanan, describing Matan Torah, Hashem said, Mi ten v'yo levavam zeh lohem liyiros kol hayomim. I wish that they would be able to be like this always and forever. Okay, so they say, Im tomar she'ein hakol goli lefonav. Could it be that HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't catch on? Kvar nemar, David HaMelech revealed, he knew what was happening. Vayifatu b'fiyim v'lshonim yichaz v'lo, v'libam no nochem limo. He knew. So what is going on here? What is going on? He gave them the Torah. He praised them for Nasev Nishma. It says that they weren't true. It says that they were tricking him. And how do we know that that's true? The proof's in the pudding. Cheta Egel happened. Something was wrong. Something was missing what was happening in there. So this I'd heard from the Talmud Rebbe. He brought that question down once before Shavuos. And he goes on to explain that this is part of our nature. Kind of similar to what we learned last week from Rebellion Meir Bloch, that in terms of emotions, right, the idea of being able, Am Yisrael were able to sing to Hashem when the Egyptians were dead, and there was no statement of Ma'aseh Yodai Tovim B'yam Atim Yom Rishir, like Hashem shut down the Malachim. He said, these Egyptians I made, they're getting destroyed. Don't sing. Am Yisrael were able to sing because we can have two things. So he brings it, the Zohar Kodesh says, right, Amar Abelazar, B'chia Tekiya Beliba Misitra Chada. You can have crying in the heart on one side. You can have joy in the heart in the other side. Okay, so therefore, not just emotions, but even here as well. The Yerushalmi in Masechet Shkolim says like this. Amar Rabbi Abba Bar Acha. He says, Rabbi Abba Bar Acha says, Einat yochol lamad al ofyo shel umazu. You can't really understand the nature of this nation. Nitboin le'egel. They came to collect gold for the egel. Noisni. They donated. Nitboin le'mishkan. Then they came around to collect for the mishkan. Also noisni. They also gave. Okay, so this is what's been happening. This is what's happening among these people. I think this week is the Yahrzeit of Kotzker Rebbe, Nachum Mendel of Kotsk. One of his very famous pithy sayings is he said is, a mensch is amanuta malach, amanuta galach. Right? A human being can be 1 minute an angel, 1 minute a priest of Avodah Zarah. That's who we are. We shock ourselves sometimes how we can flip from one thing to the other. I'll just tell you, since we're here in the neighborhood, when I was young once, I had the privilege of going to the house of Reb Shalom Shvadron, the famous Yerushalmi Maggid. He lived here in the neighborhood. And he had a little group in his house, Motzoi Shabbos. What was special about that group was he spoke in Hebrew. Many of his talks were in Yiddish. This was for boys from the Chevron Yeshiva that didn't understand Yiddish, that spoke Hebrew, and somebody got me to tag along. So I remember once he was saying some very intense stuff, and you could feel the tension in the room. And then he gave this mischievous smile. He was a tremendous actor. Just his expressions, and the way he gave this smile, he says, I got you. Right? I got you. He says, but you know and I know that 5 minutes after you walk out of here, you're capable of doing anything. So why do I waste my time? He says, I'll tell you a mashal that I told over to big people, and they said it's a good mashal. A man is lost in a huge warehouse. It is a big, empty warehouse. It is totally dark. There's no source of light. There is a door to the warehouse, and the door isn't locked. The problem is you have no way of finding the door. Suddenly someone strikes a match, and there's a moment of light, and you can look around, and then it's dark again. You're still in the dark, but now you have a sense of direction toward where the door is. That's what I hope to accomplish. He said, that's what I hope to accomplish. So that, in certain ways, is this nature. Okay, now, a person has to realize that you have both of those things in there. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, like Rabbeinu Yonah said, saw, even though that danger was there, even though there was a flaw inside of them, there was something that came and that led to that Chet HaEgel, the other part in them that was there was true and legitimate. The Nasav and Ishma really was true and legitimate. The fact that there was also a corner inside that had the potential for Chet HaEgel didn't stop HaKadosh Baruch Hu from giving them the Torah. Now, based on that Rabbeinu Yonah, it has to mean that their true direction, even though they weren't fully there, their true direction was to be Makabel Torah as it should be. Huh? Yeah. There was a puncture, like they say here in Israel, right? A flat tire went. But Lamaisa, that is what and where they wanted to go. Now, how do we know that? So there we have to understand the nature of the Jewish soul. And that's important for a person to know also. Sometimes a person thinks, especially when you surprise yourself with what I call the Galach minute, using the terms of the Kotzker, and you start to question your identity. Right? Saying, maybe I really don't care about Yiddishkeit. Maybe I'm really a Russia. Maybe, I could be either this or that, and I've now discovered that I'm that. That's not true. We say every morning, Neshama shenasata bi taharahi. The neshama that you gave to me is tahar, is pure. That statement's always true. That means deep inside what they call, the Svasemis always talks about the Nakuda Pnimis, the inner point, some call it the Pintele Yid, is uncorruptible. It always knows what it is, it always knows where it's going, it always knows where it wants to go. We don't always hear it, we don't always pay attention to it, but it's always there. Okay, that was, they say they asked the Baal Shem Tov asked them, very practical question. Mishnah in Pirkei Avos says, V'chol yom v'yom baskel yotzis me'ar chorev, v'omeres oilem liYisrael me'ol bono shel Torah. Every day a baskel comes out from Har Sinai, and it transmits woe to Am Yisrael from their insult to Torah. Baal Shem Tov asked, anybody ever hear it? Why are they broadcasting? Right? Chaval on the electricity. What was the transmitter? He says, you do hear it. He says, when you feel those feelings deep inside sometime that things aren't right, whether it's pangs of conscience or a sense of emptiness or a sense of this, he says, that's the echo of that baskel. You're hearing it, right? It's there, it reverberates. Now, oftentimes we try to shut it down and cover over it, but it's really there, okay? And that's why HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us the Torah, even though he knew there was going to be a Chet HaEgel, right? The Svasemis asked a fascinating question. I guess we'll finish with this. Later on, when we got the second luchos, right? So Chazal learned something there. They said, you know what we learn from the fact that the first Matan Torah, the luchos were smashed, and the second Matan Torah, the luchos stayed? Ein lecha yafa minat tznius. Nothing better than tznius. They had a nice, simple Matan Torah. It was on Yom Kippur. Everybody did teshuvah, they davened. Moshe Rabbeinu came down quietly, gave him the luchos. Okay, not like the first one. The first one was very grandiose. The first one had kolos ubrokim, you had thunder, you had this kol shofar that was going eternally. The entire world heard it. The entire world shook. The mountain itself was smoking, the special effect. Everything was amazing. But it didn't last. Okay, so Chazal say, better to the tznius. But who was the party planner for the first one? It wasn't us, it was HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He did all of that. So the Svasemis said, because beginnings have to be that way. He says a beginning must be that way, even if it's not going to last. That's why we still celebrate Shavuos on the giving of the first luchos, because we're still propelled by that energy from that time, even though those things didn't last. I always give the mashal, at a wedding, you see the chassan and kala are so excited. And let's say, some of the people have the minute they come around table to thank the guests for coming and giving them presents and such, right? So, they're all bright-eyed and excited. And you have a cynical guy at the table saying, yeah, I was like you also 30 years ago. Won't take long, you'll be like me, right? Something like this. What does that mean? You want it to start off that way, right? It can't, right? You need to start with the, bang, which is there. And then it helps continue and propel for the longer road which is there. And in fact, that quieter type of thing you build does last longer. For sure, that does last longer, but you can't get there. I always use the mashal of a barbecue, right? In order to light the barbecue, you need big flames. Some people put on the lighter fluid, right? They like to make these big flames. You can't cook on the big flames. That has to die down, and then when the coals are very quiet, then you can cook on it. They look barely burning, right? Like Chazal said, the words of Chachamim are like a coal. Hizor b'gachalton, be careful with them, right? That you shouldn't burn yourself because they look, I actually did this once as a kid, so it's very, I picked up what looked like a dead coal. Why I was involved in schmutzy things like that, I don't know. I saw an old barbecue sitting there someplace, picked up what I thought was a dead coal, my fingers were burnt. That's why that Chazal, I get so much. People think it's old, people think it's outdated, people think this is fire in there. Okay, so that is what can last for a long time. So therefore, HaKadosh Baruch Hu saw this, and He sees this in us today. And therefore, this message, Vayisro Refidim, Vayachnu Midbar Sinai, they went with teshuvah, they arrived in teshuvah, and that teshuvah was real. That teshuvah was real, but it wasn't complete. They were on the road to teshuvah, but it was complete enough for them to get the Torah. And therefore, we too, even when we're not complete, the Torah is given to us, just as it was given then. B'chol yom yu b'necha kachadoshim, you receive the Torah every day. You have to believe in your ability to do it, believe in your ability to progress, not to get lackadaisical and say, okay, as long as I'm on the road, and pull over by the side and take a shluff in your car. You got to be traveling on the highway of teshuvah. You got to be going. But whatever speed you're going, however long it takes, as long as you know where you want to go, and you have that clear in your mind, the Torah is yours, and it's always yours, no matter where you're found on the road. Okay, folks, have a wonderful night.